Hello and welcome to Midwest Writers Room. Our mission is to encourage, educate, and celebrate writers of the Midwest. I'm Luella Schmidt.
And I'm Ken Humphrey. Today we are interviewing Maggie Ginsberg. Maggie is the author of the novel Still True, published by the University of Wisconsin Press and winner of the Wisconsin Library Association's 2023 Literary Award for Fiction. Still True was the honorable mention selection for the 2022 Edna Ferber Fiction Book Award and is the 2026 inaugural pick for the new Wisconsin Library statewide Wisconsin Reads Digital Book Club.
Maggie is also a nonfiction writer who published hundreds of articles throughout her career, earning numerous honors from the City Regional Magazine Association, the American Society of Journalists and Authors, the Milwaukee Press Club, and others. She is the former managing editor at Madison Magazine and now works full-time as an arts writer at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We're so lucky and honored to welcome Maggie to Midwest Writers Room. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here and honored myself. So thanks for having me.
You bet.
So I got to start this off with the way Luella and I kind of process these episodes in the background. Like when we come up into a new season, this is episode 1 for season 4, we'll kind of bounce ideas back and forth. Like, who do we want to have on? And this year, and when I say this year, I mean in December when we were talking about this, my first thought was we need to have Maggie. I want Maggie Ginsberg on because we ran across her in the Hedberg Public Library Book Fest earlier this year. And you were a known name, right? I've heard of you, I've known about you. But after we sat and chatted with you, I'm like, I want to get her back on for a full-length episode. And to her credit, Luella saw the wisdom of my decision there. It was the only time that day I had something really smart to say. So we are definitely in agreement, Maggie. We wanted to lead off season 4 with you. So here
Love
we
it.
go.
Thank you. Happy New Year. It's exciting.
Yeah. So we always kick these off with just your origin story. Let's kick it back to the beginning and tell us kind of what made you want to become a writer and how you kind of process through that.
Right. I mean, that's such a good question. I think I have always been a writer. I just didn't really know that it was a job, if that makes sense. So, more than that, I think I've always been a reader. I started reading very early and just really couldn't get enough of that feeling of escape, not just escaping into other people's lives, but sort of understanding what I was feeling, what I was going through. Seeing myself on the page always made me feel less alone. I remember that even as a 4-year-old. So I've always just sort of consumed story as much as I can. But by the time I got to college, I knew that I didn't want to be a journalist, so to speak. I didn't see myself working at a newspaper, and I thought that was the only way to be a journalist. I just wanted stories. And so I ended up, my parents always said, just take the classes you are drawn to and see what it adds up to, which I think was a really kind of amazing gift in theory. Maybe not so much for the job market. But I did. I was drawn to history classes, and this is before the internet. So I realize now that it was a lot of what I do now, but it at the time it was really just reading everything I could get my hands on, crawling around in the actual stacks in the Historical Society and reading, firsthand accounts of things, researching, interviewing, and organizing information and writing. And so I ended up with a history degree thinking I would be a teacher, and then I couldn't get into the School of Education. So that I went to work. And so a long time went by before I even started writing professionally. I think I was 30 when my first article was published. I was already a mom and just had this whole other life working in this whole other industry. But I discovered freelance writing and it changed my life. And so I wrote nonfiction for many, many years. It's still what I do in my day job is write nonfiction magazine articles primarily. And then the same thing sort of happened in 2017. Even though novels are my very favorite thing to read, I didn't think of myself as that kind of writer. So it just didn't occur to me to even try. I just didn't think I had that kind of brain or imagination or whatever I thought. We tell ourselves a lot of things.
We do.
Storytellers especially are really good at telling ourselves stories about who we are and what we can't do. And so I had that change in 2017. I had this paradigm shift that gave me the courage to give it a try. And so I was sort of off to the races that way. even though I was in my 40s by then, and published my first novel at 47. So I feel
Oh,
like
I
I'm,
love that.
yeah, yeah, I feel like I'm just at the beginning of something. But it took a while and kind of an unconventional path to get there.
So speaking on behalf of my wife, who has read your novel, I'll say
Ah,
thank you for doing that. But I want to dig a little more into that first article. I mean, you said you came into it late in your 30s. Can you talk us through when did you know you were going to write that article? Was there some sort of trigger moment that said, this is the article, this is what I want to write, or did it just happen out of the blue?
Oh, so I don't have any formal writing training. I don't have an MFA. I don't have a journalism degree. But at 30, I enrolled in what was then called uh, what was it called? Mini courses, UW mini courses. I think today it's called continuing studies. But I was at the doctor's office and sitting in the waiting room, and I saw a pamphlet for these courses, and there was one called Introduction to Freelance Writing. It was $19. It was two nights. The last Wednesday night in February 2006 and the first Wednesday night in March 2006. I went to that first class, and the instructor, Frank Burrs, who's still to this day one of my favorite nonfiction writers, he explained what freelance writing was. And I heard violins. I mean, it sounds wild now, but I honestly thought, oh, I had no idea that you didn't have to wait for this sort of um, permission, from on high or something, that I could just go out and pitch stories and try this. And so the assignment for that first class was to practice to write a pitch letter, to think of a story idea and write a pitch letter that you would send to an editor. But I went home that night. I got home at 10 o'clock at night, and I set up a Yahoo small business website, and I ordered business cards that said Maggie Ginsberg, freelance writer. And
Oh my gosh.
yeah, and in the morning, I called the local newspaper and I asked if I could write something for free. And they were like, well, hang on, who are you? And, let's talk a little bit. And I didn't have to write something for free. They actually gave me an assignment that I could try out. And so when I went to that second class, which was the last night, um, instead of a pitch letter, I had a published article. Um, and then from there, I tried to get into magazines then, and the editor asked for clips, which is published articles. And so I went back to the newspaper and said, "Can I do another one?" And then that one was published, and by that time, my business cards had come, and so I sent those two articles and my business cards to the Madison Magazine editor with a little post-it note that said, "Just a couple of my latest clips."
Oh my gosh. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. But that newspaper, they made me a staff writer, and I wrote 2 or 3 articles a week for about a year, and it was such an incredible education. And I think that's kind of the key is I've always tried to take myself seriously, treat it like a small business. Writing is about so much more than writing. You have to be your own marketing machine and your own bookkeeper and your own editor and all of these things. And so I did all kinds of things like writing myself my own code of ethics and just taking as many classes and reading as many books as I could and just trying to learn from other writers. And that's what I've done ever since. I have taken a lot of workshops, gone to conferences, befriended people I admire and people that are better at this than I am, and just tried to learn as much as I could and just practice, practice, practice.
So this is such a fantastic story, Llewellyn. And I think here's why. What it really struck with me is, I mean, you went and you randomly took a class because it was something that you were interested in, but you actually took something away from that class and did something with it. I mean, how many of us or how many people do we know that have gone and taken a class on something or other, but then really didn't follow up or do anything? They talked about taking a class, but they didn't do the homework or they didn't follow the assignment. They just didn't carry through with it. You did, and just, I mean, look what happened. Look what that spawned. What a great story.
Yeah, it really is. To go from, I love the visual of you crawling around the historical society looking for firsthand accounts. And then you put that alongside the fact that the first night of the class, you went home and created a website. I mean, how many people by the second time of the class had gone as far as you had?
Well, the teacher was pretty baffled. Yeah, no, I think it's really the sort of moral of the story is is not waiting for that cosmic permission. I just think,
That is the moral
yeah,
story for sure, listeners. Do not, nobody's going to give you permission. Just go do what you want, man.
they're
There is no
not.
sign from the heavens, right? It's just
Right.
when you pull the trigger.
No, exactly, exactly.
So let's
Love
talk
it.
about then the novel, Still True. Just for our listeners' sake, just kind of walk us through the synopsis of it, and then also how that came to you. I mean, you said you wanted to try fiction, but
Mhm.
what was that moment you said, "Okay, this is it, and this is my novel, and what it's going to be"?
Well, that was a case of another couple of classes and workshops that I took once I opened myself up to the possibility that I could try to write fiction. And so by 2017, I just set myself up to do math. I was well into a nonfiction writing career. I can't think of how many years. And that means that I had, more than a decade of daily writing and meeting deadlines and writing to publication and interviewing people and learning people. And so I think that that played a really big role in when I sort of made this pivot, although I don't think of it as a pivot because I still do that kind of writing. I just do them both now. But there used to be a UW Continuing Studies. I know a lot of listeners will know this one. There used to be Right by the Lake, that was the UW Continuing Studies writing program. That was a week-long class that took place in Madison in the summertime, and you could choose a track and you would take that class for a week where every morning you were just with the same people going to the same course. And I did that for many years. I loved it very much. And I always took nonfiction classes because I was just trying to further my career. And one year I was late to sign up, and all of the nonfiction tracks were filled. And so I didn't want to miss it. I loved that conference. And so I looked around and I saw there was still an opening in this fiction class called Your First Novel, Fast and Finished by Kathy Steffen, wonderful writer. And we were supposed to bring writing to work on, but I didn't have any fiction. And so I told myself, I'm just going to go and absorb. And it was much like that first mini course that I took about freelance writing. I just sat there with my jaw on the ground. I don't know why. It shouldn't be so earth-shattering, this concept that, of course, there are rules to writing fiction too, and there's the same sorts of scaffolding and storytelling methods and things. Of course, that's true, but I just hadn't. I had this block in my head. I don't know. And so once I saw, I mean, oh, she had so many worksheets, and I just ate this up. I was so into it. I got this binder and I just had all these worksheets. And so I didn't write anything in that class, but I just feel like it changed my life. And uh and Kathy had said, well, I hope you will go and write something. And if you do, I will give you the same treatment that the other students got, in that I'll look at 15 pages, which is a really valuable thing for a writer to offer. And so um, I did kind of go home and noodle around with some pages, and was so scared to send them, but I sent them to her, and she sent me back an email that I printed and hung on my board that said, "If you don't do something more with this, I'll be really mad." And that was all I needed, to have just that little bit of confidence. And so then I enrolled in another course. It's not available anymore, but it was called the Fifth Semester, and it was run by two authors that everybody knows, Erin Salello and Anne Garvin. And it was a 4-month program. And it started with a residency weekend in Chicago, where you learned about the craft of writing a novel. And it ended 4 months later with a residency weekend in New York, where you learned about the business of publishing a novel. And in those 4 months in between, you worked one-on-one with one of them and you wrote and got feedback. And it was a big investment, and I took it very seriously. And I just decided, like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try. And so this was in January to May of 2017. And I'll never forget, I was paired up with Erin Salello, and she said, "Okay, what do you want your goal to be for these 4 months?" And I said, "Well, can you write a whole book in 4 months?" And she, and she goes, "Yeah, she just kind of looked over my shoulder and shrugged and goes, yeah. And I believed her. So I was like, okay, well, then put that down. Let's do that. And so I went home and I got a spreadsheet and I figured it out. And if I wrote 1,000 words a day by the end of the course, I'd have a manuscript. And I did. And I did it all between 5 and 7 in the morning when nobody needed anything and it was dark, it was winter, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't have any voices in my head yet, telling me I couldn't do it. And it was just kind of this thing I quietly did. And at the end of the 4 months, sure enough, when you sit down and you actually write 1,000 words a day, there were the pages. And so we got to New York, and it turned out I was the only one who had done that. I was like, you guys, I thought we had to. Like, I'm a grown up. I did the homework. Like, I spent money. This was scary. Um, and so when we learned about the business of publishing, I had this concrete manuscript to work with and was able to, have this assistance in writing query letters and synopsis and logline and all that stuff that I think is harder than writing a book. And I could go on forever about this. Long story short, I got an agent a week later, and she was a big shot agent. And I was like, "Here we go. We're off to the races. This is so easy. I'll just do this. Let's see, 3 times a year, maybe 4 times a year, and I'll be with Stephen King, and we'll hang out, vacationing on Cape Cod, and this is great." But that was May 2017, and Still True did not sell until January 2021. So it was not what happened. And it was a long and enlightening and sort of tragic and then ultimately good road to get there. But boy, what a tough business. But
Can I just say how frustrated I am on your behalf that you did the assignment, showed up with everything, and then you still had to wait all those years to have it published.
years.
It's not fair.
Yeah, it was 5 long years before I held that book in my hand, from that.
Crazy, but that is such a relatable story too. And you kind of captured it when you said it was scary. I think that's a lot of authors. They're like, all right, I have this book idea in my head, and then somebody looks at you and says, okay, do it, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, wait, right? It's easier to talk, it's easier to theorize than to actually execute. So yeah, good on you for doing the homework and going through with it. That's very impressive.
Well, I think we skipped to that part where we think we compare our work in progress to published work, to these books on the shelf, and it's just so intimidating and daunting, and it just feels like we're never going to get there. And again, those stories we tell ourselves about why we can't do it, and that really can add up and lead you to just sit there, just not getting the writing done. But boy, you've got to have something to work with, to make better. Like either way, the time is going to go by. So if you've got the material, you're going to be in a far better position than if you just sat there thinking about how you can't do it, which I'm not judging. I've been there.
Agreed. And as somebody who sets impossibly stupid deadlines for my own writing, I mean, most of my books were written between 6 and 12 months because I'm not very intelligent in terms of planning ahead. I concur with your mentor's nod and say, yep, you can do it.
Problem.
And I also relate completely to your plan. Yeah, I'll crank these out 3, 4 a year and we'll all be good to the races. I first started, I'm like, all right, I'll do 2 books a year. Right. And just, by 2020, then, I should have, I'll have a dozen books all under my belt. Well, that fell apart very, very quickly after the first year.
Yeah, there are some people who can do it, but
it's rough. All right, Luella, should we jump onto the WWA message?
Yeah, you bet. Midwest Writers Room is a production of the Wisconsin Writers Association. For $35 a year, WWA membership connects you to inspiring programs, free monthly events, and a statewide community that believes in helping writers thrive. Learn more and become a member at wiwrite.org. Going forward in this space, you will also see us start to provide writing tips and tricks from WWA members, so stay tuned for that. All right, we're going to move on to segment 2 of the podcast, a little bit more with Maggie and maybe some writerly advice. Um, so, I guess I'll just start by saying, do you have any writerly advice? Is there, I mean, what's at the top of your mind having just gone through this? Give us what you got.
Yeah, I mean, it's so it's so easy to say this, but you really do have to separate the writing from the publishing. And I'm savvier than that. Like I do, especially as a working writer for so long, of course I'm thinking about the business. Of course I'm thinking about this better go somewhere. But ultimately, I think that it's easy to make some bad decisions about the writing if you're anxious to get to the publishing. And so trying to find a way to really protect that idea that no matter what happens, you're going to put together the very best thing you can. And that's different for everyone. I think that's kind of, I'm not a big advice person, but my second piece of advice is sort of the don't listen to advice piece, which is really learn your own brain. And I think about this all the time. We go looking for these formulas of how to be the best possible writer and how other people are doing it. And it's just it's so individual. It's so unique to each of us. And I think if you can really there's a fine line between like fraud complex and opportunity for, just doing it your own way. And I think it took me a long time to just build that confidence in myself that I'm just doing this the way I know how to do it. And I'm not going to worry about how other people do it. And I'm not going to compare myself to other people. And I'm just going to try to do the best I can, and I'm going to try every day. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to sit down and write 1,000 words every day either. I have not always, but I have done the best I can to protect that sort of ritual of of spending time alone with my mind inside of whatever story I'm working on. And for me, there's noise canceling headphones, there's the same sort of time each day, there's the coffee, there's the blanket, there's the, just the things I need right around me. But mostly it's that setting that intention and just being there with it. The further I get away from it, the harder it is to get back. So, just really trusting that if I'm showing up for myself and just sitting in that quiet, what's going to happen will happen. And I don't, instead of measuring it, with those spreadsheets and word counts and what other people are doing.
So I have to
Yeah,
ask
that's
you
a
then.
lot of, go ahead, Ken.
I was going to say, so during the writing of Still True, did you run into any writer's block moments? And if so, what did you do to overcome it? Or did it just flow like water from you?
So that story did sort of flow like water, but what I'm realizing is it was the first draft that flowed like water, and that's great. And the reason I learned that that's not always the case is that I tried to write a second book and it took years and it flowed like sludge and it went down all kinds of different wrong, dead end trails. So I'm not going to take that sludge metaphor any further, but it was really, really, really difficult for me to write a second book. Um, I had so much advice in my head, and I had so much business in my head, and at that point, so much rejection, beautiful as they can be, these lovely rejections from editors as you're trying to publish your manuscript, and different revisions I'd done, and just different, I had a whole head full of how it's supposed to be, and that really slowed me down. Um, and so I think what I really learned in the second book, so I completed a second manuscript. Um, didn't It took years and I hated it and tore it apart and started over. And so really that second manuscript, it took about 4 years to write. And what I really learned is do that first draft fast, see that first draft through, because I just let all that other stuff just drag it out and drag it out and drag it out, um, and that I didn't know what I was working with yet. And so I've just this was going to be my part of my good news, but I did just finish the process of a third manuscript, and even though the business side of things is so scary, There's something so important about knowing that you can finish, that you can see something through from beginning to end, and revise it in a way that is hopefully publishable and that you can be proud of. I didn't know that I could do that again, especially because that second one took so long, and didn't sell, by the way. So that's the difficult part is continuing to just keep going, keep practicing, keep trying to get better. I think this third one is my strongest effort. But I don't know. I hope that I'm learning and developing and that it all sort of, goes somewhere together, just adds up to something bigger than me. And I just have to trust that process. But yeah, it's the seeing it through that I think is the most helpful thing, at least me in learning my own brain, the most helpful thing I can possibly do. Push through to the end of that first draft as quickly as you can before you have time to lose interest in it, lose sight of what you're doing, change as a person. So much happens in that time that you're writing a first draft if you drag it out as long as I have before.
Yeah. So much good advice in that answer. I particularly like the visual of like the way you described your writing ritual, the fact that you the blanket and the 2 hours of time with your own mind and the story. I thought that was a really nice way to put it. And I don't know, maybe this is my own bias, Ken, but particularly for women, like the fact that so much of the writing happens first thing in the morning because there's always it feels like there's always people coming for you. You
Exactly.
have to do.
Job and it started out as some of the way I had to do it. That's the only time that I had before having to get my family out the door and go to my own job and all of those things. But it turned into something that's really just my time. I really protect it. It's really something I love.
Yeah.
um,
And is that so? I mean, we like to ask our guests what their muse is. Some people really find inspiration in nature or with music or whatever. And I don't know, is your muse your morning ritual? Is there other muses that kind of inspire you?
It absolutely is. I have this interesting relationship with my subconscious because you can't it won't show up on command, right? It's one of those things you have to sort of trick into coming to visit you. And so I figure I set the table, right, when I sit down and I try to do this deep focus work. But then I stop and I always go do something completely unrelated to writing, and it's usually exercise of some kind outside. And I find that that's when the subconscious will sort of come to visit. And the story questions I've been grappling with, or just the puzzle of putting a book together, those things will start to come. Like the subconscious is so shy, and you just have to like pretend you're not looking at it. You're do. I'm just on a walk. I'm just looking at the lake. Everything's fine. And then slowly it'll start to sort of whisper to
Yep.
you. And I'm always stopping and like, leaving myself these breathless like voice texts or, thumbing things into my notes app that I can't understand later. But it's all part of it for me. So it's that sort of um, give and take mutual, muse there of the ritual and then getting away from it too.
Yeah, that's smart. I like the fact that the fact that you're creating the conditions for it to arise is the best we can do. We can't force it, like you said. So you're just creating the conditions for it to arise.
Right. It's
Yeah.
the only piece of this process I feel like I have any kind of control over, especially the business side of things is so outside of my control. So I do try to protect those things I can control, because that's part of what makes it a joyful process.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love that.
that's incredible. So, Luella, you may be my work wife, but I think Maggie might be my kindred spirit because, boy, I mean, a lot of what you're saying are things that I just think I feel that it just kind of all hit me the same way. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
very
this is
relatable.
fantastic. Yeah, absolutely relatable. All right, shall we dive into our special sauce?
That's right. My favorite. So our special sauce is always, what makes you different? What skill, passion, hobby? I don't know. It's a way for us to get to know you in a little deeper level. So what do you got for us?
It's so terrible. I feel this way at work too when we go around and like everyone talks about their hobbies and what they did over the weekend. And I'm always like, I don't think I have anything besides work. I'm so boring. My hobbies are writing and reading. And some of this is left over from freelancing for so many years where you don't really, there isn't really a weekend, it's sort of feast or famine. And so and I've always had a day job. And so because writing hasn't been a way to get rich, I don't know if y'all know that. Uh,
Heard that somewhere.
and so, for me, it's always been like if there's time that I'm not at work, then I need to use that time writing, or if I have days off from work, I need to use those days off writing. So but I also try to protect reading because reading has been my number one writing teacher for sure. Because I haven't had that formal training, I think the best training you can have is just reading, 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 reading books that are like the ones you want to write and reading books that have nothing to do with the ones you want to write. But there's just something, I call it composting, where I don't have to write it down. I don't have to keep track of where it's all going or what it all adds up to, but you're just sort of like putting all of this stuff in and it's gonna, you know, go through its chemical process. I hope I'm not back to a sludge metaphor again, but it's going to do what it does, and it's going to come out in the work in ways you aren't aware of. And so uh, now I can't remember what we were talking. Oh, hobbies, and so I'm worried I don't have any hobbies. I did over winter break. I had this really strange in between phase where I had sent my manuscript to my agent and had actual days off from work. Um, and so that morning writing time, I didn't want to start something new because I needed to stay close for revisions. I needed to stay close to this story. And so I just was like, maybe I'm a knitter now. And so I found like knitting that I hadn't picked up in 20 years and tried to make sense of it and read and, just kind of sat in my chair under 1,000 blankets. And I discovered this woman on YouTube named Cecilia. I'm completely obsessed with her. She lives on the island of Svalbard, which is this polar island, uh, or Arctic island. It's polar night right now, and all she does is like stoke the fire and walk her dog, and I'm just riveted. And so I just have that on the TV, and I'm knitting, and I'm just I don't know, being the 97-year-old woman that I've always been. And that's been lovely. So I would like to call that a hobby. I don't know if it counts.
I mean,
It
it's
absolutely
January in the
counts.
Midwest. So, you mentioned, so this is like, how do we pronounce it? Is it Huga? Huga? How do you pronounce it?
Yeah,
Huga.
I got a gift in the mail of this card game that's called Huga. So it's Hygge. I think you say Hoga or Huga. And yeah, it's this
Huga.
whole the Scandinavian idea of being like cozy and in the dark in the polar
The
night.
art of cozy.
Yeah.
Yes, the art of being cozy when it's cold.
Yeah. And the game, I highly recommend it. It's not even a game really. It's just like questions on cards, conversation starters. And we had such a lovely time as a family. Like even all the teenage and adult children that were home, we just had the loveliest time sitting around the table and just using these cards to just talk about life and memories. And I don't know, I highly recommend it. But yeah,
Right.
that act of embracing what we've got here instead of hiding from it. It's the
I
only
like that idea. I like embracing. What was the name of that game?
It was just called Huga, or
Oh, okay. Got it. I'll have to find it.
All right.
yeah.
Be tracking that one down. All right. How about telling our listeners where they can find you out there in the virtual world?
So I have a website, maggieginsberg.com. I'm not always great at updating it, but I try. And I kind of just put everything there that I can. I also technically have a Substack newsletter, um, but I think I've only ever sent it out like 6 times. I feel really guilty whenever I get a new subscriber and I'm like, welcome, there's nothing here. But I do try. I do try. I'm going to do better. I resolve to do better. And then all the usual social media places, although I'm not as into them as I once was. I'm probably most active on Instagram, where there's less talking. But yeah, I try to keep things on my website for the most part.
All right. And then we'll obviously throw the link down in our show notes. All right, Luella, time for good news.
Listeners and viewers, we love to celebrate your good news, so be sure you email it to us. We'll call you out on the podcast. Our email address is podcast@wiwrite.org. Ken, you want to kick it off for us?
Sure. So February 8th, I just booked a author appearance at Blue House Books in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And this is centered around my breakfast jury book. And, for listeners and viewers that aren't aware of it, which are probably everybody, this is a book that's based on a murder trial for which I was a jury foreman. And then I created a fictional murder mystery out of it, but used, almost all the facts from the trial. Well, the cool thing for this author appearance is I got a couple of the jurors that are going to be coming with me. Kind of do
that's neat.
Yeah, beyond the meet and greet, because one of the things that I found whenever people found out my book and they talk to me, they want to know about the trial itself. And so, we'll kind of subvert the meet and greet, more of a Q&A about the trial. I even tried to get the detective, that was the lead detective on this, because we're in touch. But unfortunately for me, fortunately for him, he winters in Florida, so he will not be around. But very excited to do
have
that.
to come down and check this out, Ken. Your work wife might have to come down and stalk you a little bit.
February 8th, Luella, you know it.
I'm on it.
How about you, Maggie? What do you got for good news?
Oh, cool. Sorry, I'm stuck on your good news. I love Blue House Books.
That's a good one.
Great. My good news, besides again reiterating that I just finished another manuscript when I didn't know that I could. So whatever happens, happens, but knowing in myself that I could see that through is huge for me. So I'm celebrating that. I'm trying to remember to celebrate that. And then really good news is that the group that organizes the Wisconsin libraries, I think there are like 600 or so members of the Wisconsin libraries. They're starting a new statewide digital reads book club to encourage audiobook and e-lending. And they've selected Still True as the first pick for 2026, which is just unbelievable and so exciting. And that kicked off January 15th and runs through March 15th. And so anyone with a Wisconsin library card can check out the audiobook or the ebook of Still True without any kind of wait. They secured simultaneous use licenses or however that works. And then there will be a Q&A event in March to talk about what people liked or didn't like about the book.
Very, very cool. Congrats there.
That is really neat. I love that you're kicking it off. That's a really cool piece of cred.
Announced anywhere. So this is breaking news.
We break news on this podcast all the time, don't we, Ken?
Yes, we do. So Luella, what do you got for good news?
Oh, my good news is that I have this new table in my office it's a sole use is to color and put together big puzzles. So I'm going into my hermit era, I've decided. Oh, there's my dog. Could you hear it? Hopefully it didn't mess it up. Anyway, so yeah, this is a new piece of furniture that its whole purpose is for play. So I think that's a happy thing to start the new year with. All right, again. Sorry, what?
I was going to say, just for our listeners and viewers, anybody knows, when you're leading into this before we started recording, we're talking about the table, and Luella held up the puzzle, and Maggie's like, "Oh, I've done that one. I know that one." I've never felt so outside of a room as I have for that moment. I'm like, "Oh, that looks like a horrible thing." I can't bear to look at that.
I remember distinctly. I did that one in lockdown. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Popular activity for the lockdown.
Yeah.
All right. Once again, that email address is podcast@wiwrite.org. We would love to shout you out and hear your good news and celebrate with you.
So at this time, I want to thank Maggie for coming on to the show and chatting with us. If everybody out there has enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star rating in your app of choice. This is the type of action that helps everybody else find us, helps us grow the program. Thanks for hanging out with us in the Midwest Writers Room. I'm Ken Humphrey.
And I'm Luella Schmidt. Words ignite imaginations and spark change. Never underestimate the power of storytelling.
Midwest Writers Room is a production of the Wisconsin Writers Association. Writing and editing by Luella Schmidt and Ken Humphrey. Sound design and editing by Ken Humphrey. Music for the Midwest Writers Room was written by Michael Ramir C. For more information, please visit wiwrite.org/podcast. Thank you.